We should have known better. Looking back, the red flags were practically waving a parade in our faces. There was the way old man Jenkins, the grizzled gas station attendant, practically choked on his dentures when we mentioned Devil's Perch. "Ain't no good place for young folks," he wheezed, his voice raspy like sandpaper. Then there was the complete lack of information online. No reviews, no pictures, just a single, ominous forum post titled "Stayed one night at Devil's Perch. Never going back," with no further details. But hey, we were young, invincible, and fueled by a potent cocktail of arrogance and boredom. Our usual camping spots were starting to feel stale, and Devil's Perch, nestled deep in a remote corner of Blackwood National Forest, promised an adventure off the beaten path. So, with a truck full of camping gear, questionable snacks, courtesy of Mike's bottomless chip addiction, and enough bravado to silence a small army, we set off. The drive was long and dusty, the GPS signal flickering in and out as we ventured deeper into the woods. By the time we reached the turnoff for Devil's Perch, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and red. The road, barely more than a dirt track at this point, snaked its way through a dense forest, the towering trees forming a dark, oppressive canopy overhead. An unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. "Man, this place is creepy," muttered Sarah, her voice barely a whisper. She was the cautious one in our group, the one who always researched first aid kits and emergency procedures before any trip. "Relax, saps," Mike scoffed, his usual bravado in full force. "It's just the woods. They make spooky noises everywhere." But even Mike seemed a little on edge. We all did, to be honest. The deeper we ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew thick and humid, and a strange, metallic tang hung on the tip of our tongues. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we stumbled upon a clearing. The remnants of what could have once been a campsite lay scattered around. A half-collapsed fire pit, a circle of blackened stones, and a single, rusted lantern hanging limply from a gnarled branch. This was Devil's Perch. The sun had completely set by now, plunging us into an inky blackness. We set about unpacking our gear, the silence broken only by the crackle of the campfire and the nervous chatter amongst ourselves. As the fire cast flickering shadows on the surrounding trees, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, a feeling like 1,000 unseen eyes were following our every move. The night wore on, punctuated by a series of unsettling occurrences. Flashlights flickered on and off seemingly on their own. Strange whispers, like voices carried on the wind, drifted through the trees, just beyond the reach of comprehension. We dismissed these at first as nerves and shadows, but as the night deepened, the unease settled into a bone-chilling fear. Then came the journal. We found it tucked under a loose rock near the fire pit, its leather cover weathered and cracked. The yellowed pages were filled with faded script, the writing frantic and smeared in some parts. It was the diary of a previous camper, a young man named Thomas who had ventured to Devil's Perch alone a decade ago. The journal entries were chilling. Thomas described a sense of dread that grew stronger with each passing hour, a feeling of being trapped in the woods. He mentioned strange lights in the distance, disembodied voices calling his name, and a growing sense of paranoia that drove him to the brink of madness. The final entry was the most disturbing. He spoke of a ritual performed at Devil's Perch, an attempt to appease an ancient, vengeful spirit that resided within the woods. The ritual failed, and Thomas's last words were a desperate plea for help, scrawled across the page in a frantic hand. A cold sweat slicked my skin as I finished reading the journal aloud. The fire crackled ominously, casting grotesque shadows on the faces of my friends. The whispers in the trees seemed to grow louder, more insistent now. We were not alone. We had unwittingly stumbled upon something ancient and evil, and it was clear. Devil's Perch wasn't just a remote campsite. It was a gateway to something far more sinister. The weight of Thomas's journal settled on us like a shroud. Sleep, if it ever came, was filled with unsettling dreams of flickering lights and disembodied voices echoing his final plea. The following day dawned gray and oppressive, the oppressive silence broken only by the nervous chirping of unseen birds. The forest seemed to press in on us, the cheerful camaraderie of the previous day replaced by a heavy silence. Mike, usually the life of the party, was pale and withdrawn. Sarah, Her eyes rimmed with red, kept clutching a small crucifix she wore around her neck. We didn't have cell service here, in the nearest town. According to the tattered map we found in the glove compartment, was hours away on that barely there dirt track. Leaving seemed like the obvious choice, but a primal fear kept us rooted to the spot. As the day wore on, the strange occurrences escalated. We saw fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures darting between the trees, just out of sight. Our flashlights flickered and died with increasing frequency, plunging us into temporary darkness that felt suffocating. The whispers evolved into distinct words, chilling pronouncements in a language none of us recognized, yet somehow understood. "Leave. This place is not for you." Panic was rising, a tide threatening to drown us in its icy grip. Suddenly, Sarah pointed towards the fire pit. The blackened stones, undisturbed since the previous night, were now arranged in an intricate pattern, the same pattern described in Thomas's journal as part of the failed ritual. Terror choked the breath from my lungs. Something, or someone, was actively trying to engage us, to draw us deeper into whatever darkness lurked in these woods. We huddled together, our backs pressed against each other for comfort. Fear had stripped away our bravado, leaving behind raw, primal terror. We needed a plan, but any semblance of rational thought had evaporated. Just when despair threatened to consume us, I remembered the final sentence of Thomas's journal, a desperate plea for help. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to appease this vengeful spirit. "We need to try the ritual," I blurted out, my voice shaky but surprisingly steady. Confused stares met my words, but the desperation in my eyes must have been convincing. I reread the ritual from the journal, the ancient symbols twisting on the page like malevolent serpents. Gathering the necessary items, a handful of twigs from the surrounding trees and a scrap of fabric torn from my shirt, we followed the cryptic instructions. The air crackled with unseen energy as we chanted the words from the journal, our voices stumbling over the unfamiliar language. A cold wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the campfire and sending a shiver down my spine. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, a change. The whispers ceased, replaced by an eerie silence so profound it felt deafening. The shadowy figures vanished from the tree-line. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a strange sense of peace. We held our breath, unsure if this was a trick or a genuine reprieve. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, casting long shadows across the forest floor, we finally dared to believe it might be over. We packed our belongings in a frenzy, a renewed urgency in our movements. We didn't waste time debating whether to explore further or investigate the source of the evil. Leaving Devil's Perch was the only thing on our minds. The drive back was a blur. We barely spoke, each lost in our own thoughts, replaying the events of the past few days. It wasn't until we were safely back on a paved road, the familiar sight of civilization a welcome balm to our frayed nerves, that we finally exhaled the breaths we'd been holding for what felt like an eternity. We never talked about what happened at Devil's Perch much after that. It was an unspoken agreement, a shared trauma that bound us together in a way nothing else could. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls outside my window and the shadows dance on the wall, I swear I can hear a faint whisper, a single chilling word that sends shivers down my spine. Remember. The silence that followed our escape from Devil's Perch wasn't entirely peaceful. It was a hollowness that resonated within us, a constant reminder of the darkness we'd brushed against. We returned to our lives, but the experience clung to us like a miasma. Sarah became more devout, clutching her crucifix like a shield against unseen forces. Mike, his bravado shattered, became withdrawn, prone to nervous tics and jump scares. Months passed, and a semblance of normalcy returned. Then, one evening, a knock on my door shattered the fragile peace. It was Sarah, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. "It started again," she gasped, shoving a worn copy of Thomas's journal into my hands. The whispers. "They're back, stronger than ever." The journal entries were new, scribbled in a frantic hand that resembled Thomas's, but felt different, more desperate, more pleading. He spoke of a growing darkness, a hunger that could no longer be contained. He warned of a ritual incomplete, a gateway left ajar, and the consequences that awaited if it remained unsealed. Fear gnawed me, but there was a flicker of determination too. We couldn't ignore this. We owed it to Thomas, and to ourselves, to finish what we'd started. This time, we weren't alone. We contacted a local historian, a wizened old woman named Ms. Hawthorne, known for her knowledge of the region's occult history. Hearing our story, her face creased in worry. "Devil's Perch," she muttered, "a place steeped in dark magic. The ritual you performed was meant to appease an ancient entity, a trickster god known as the Ravenous Maw. Incomplete, it may have only angered it." Ms. Hawthorne spoke of a counter-ritual, a complex process requiring rare ingredients and a deep understanding of the entity's language. Days turned into weeks as we scoured dusty bookstores and arcane websites, piecing together the puzzle. We found references to an obsidian mirror, a vial of wolfsbane, and a chant spoken in the dialect of forgotten tongues. The night of the full moon arrived, cloaking the world in an eerie silver light. We returned to Devil's Perch, a place we swore never to see again. The clearing looked different now, malevolent energy warping the air. The arrangement of stones from the previous ritual lay undisturbed, a mocking reminder of our failure. Following Ms. Hawthorne's instructions, we set up the counter-ritual. The air crackled as we chanted the guttural words, the obsidian mirror reflecting a distorted image of ourselves, eyes glowing with a borrowed power. Just as we completed the ritual, the ground trembled. A monstrous figure materialized from the shadows, a ravenous maw replacing its face, filled with a hunger that seemed to devour the very light. Fear threatened to paralyze us, but we pressed on, wielding the wolfsbane like a sacred weapon. The air crackled with a battle of wills. The entity lunged, but the obsidian mirror, imbued with the power of the chant, deflected its attack. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the ravenous maw was banished back into the darkness from whence it came. Silence descended, thick and heavy. The clearing seemed lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. We had faced our fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged, battered but not broken. As dawn painted the horizon with hues of pink and orange, we left Devil's Perch behind, this time for good. The experience forged a new bond between us, one born of shared trauma and hard-won courage. We knew, however, that the whispers might return one day, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the veil, waiting for a chance to break through. And when that day came, we would be ready.